It had taken a week to arrive at Planet Herb, and 268 made sure to pester Cooler every step of the way there. He kept insisting that time was of the essence, that this was a waste of time, and that they needed to defeat Frieza as soon as possible. At first, the Iceling simply found this annoying, but he soon grew wary of all these warnings, as if the robot knew something he didn't. This suspicion only further exacerbated when his small cough progressed into a near constant compulsion. Cooler tried to hide away in his quarters during this time, hoping the cough would go away on its own, attempting to control his defiant body, though this proved difficult when Salza and 268 came knocking. Apparently, they had arrived at their destination and Salza's clearance code had failed. 268 advises that they leave, something Salza surprisingly agrees with since he feels something is off. Retreat? Tell me, since when did I find myself surrounded by such cowards? Cooler stepped out of his cabin, walking out towards the hangar bay and opening the airlock. Monsieur Cooler, what are you planning? I'm softening up the enemy, Salza. Something I see you're no longer capable of. The cyborg flew out into open space, spotting 3 large Frieza Force ships surrounding his own. With a simple swipe of his hand, all 3 were sliced in half, the explosions bathing the cyborg's body in shimmering light. Salza was horrified whilst Flake and Dory were cheering, yelling to land the ship and get this party started. Lord Coulet, we can't. Can't what? Those soldiers would have killed you without a second thought. And aside from you, if Frieza learned of my existence, we'd stand no chance against him or father. Salza wanted to continue the conversation, at least try to remind Cooler of his prior views, but the cyborg had already flown down towards Planet Herb. Naze landed the ship as despite his horror at the situation, he knew they had to follow their leader. The crew exited the ship with Dory and Flake eagerly charging into several Frieza Force buildings. Salza could sense Cooler flying around the area, casually destroying large swaths of buildings and soldiers. Neither Salza or Naze could interfere. The best they could do was to get to the remaining soldiers before their comrades, knocking them out in an attempt at salvation. Whilst the various warriors laid siege to Planet Herb, several saibaman made their existence known, coming out of giant domes set up as greenhouses. Cooler assumed the scientists there had released them in the hopes they'd distract him, but these creatures were destroyed without a second thought. A few ships tried to escape during this time, but those were shot down as well. Overall, the crew were able to easily overcome Herb's defenses, though Cooler could still feel a few life forms on the planet. The cyborg decided to investigate the strongest of the survivors, whilst sending Dory and Flake to finish off the others. When tracking down the remaining individual, Cooler was led to a giant dome, one far bigger than the others. So, was this another Cyberman? Possibly some mutant created sometime during the past 10 years? Well, there's only one way to find out. Cooler blasted a hole in the dome before flying in, his sensors instantly scanning the foreign life form. In the middle of the room was a giant flower, if you could call it that. It was seemingly rooted by the floor, though several large petals covered the ground surrounding its main body. Layered on top of the petals were large blades of grass, though upon further inspection, these were more like vines and clearly prehensile as they were moving about. From there, what looked like a humanoid torso connected to a large stalk or trunk, culminating in a large head that had split into a blooming flower. What remained of the torso and head looked like it was once a normal Cyberman, though its features had been warped and stretched. Almost as soon as Cooler had processed all this data, the creature opened its massive red eyes, staring directly at the cyborg.
So, you are the being responsible for freeing my children. I thank you, stranger.
The creature seemed to bow its head, though it was clearly strained when trying to move. I assume you mean those Cybermen. I destroyed them just as I intend to destroy you. Cooler held his hand up, key bathing the room in purple light.
Halt, stranger. I accept my end is near, yet I favor a request of you before my extermination.
The creature looked directly into Cooler's eyes, showing no fear, nor the will to fight. This intrigued the cyborg, who told this creature to go on.
Long ago, these scientists enslaved my people, though they found use in the inexperienced sprouts you call Cybermen. We've been taken apart, dissected, our bodies forced to house unnatural metals that control our bodies. Even now, that programming makes me long to commit acts of aggression on you, stranger. Yet, I've yearned for this day, the day our species can start anew, unabated by the unnatural ways of your kind. All I ask is you take this, the final child of mine.
The creature bowed with great effort, revealing a single large black seed, something that confused Cooler, who remembered these being quite smaller.
Take it. Hurry, stranger. This is the last true remnant of our species. Take it and destroy this wretched planet.
Cooler was hesitant to take something so important, so full of life, especially when he reached out and saw the cold metal that made up his own being. That's when Salsa stepped forward and took the seed, cradling it in his arms whilst promising to keep it safe. The creature seemed to sigh in relief before returning to its original pose, though its vines started to creep towards the two warriors.
Good. Plant Ceylon somewhere it'll be safe, far, far from those who'd seek to use it. Let it live a long life as our ancestors did. As for you two, especially the stronger creature, our lives are often cut short. Live to see the day your legacy can thrive. Now I bid you farewell.
Salsa was about to ask the creature something, but Cooler put a hand in front of the soldier, blocking a strike from the hundreds of vines lunging at them. They tried to fly away, but roots sprung up from the ground and wrapped around their legs, whilst a giant Venus flytrap-looking mouth appeared from behind the creature, ready to eat them. Cooler, sick of this, put his hand up and charged a purple key blast in his hand. Salsa was too busy fending off vines to be sure, but he could have sworn he heard his boss say sorry before executing the plant. Once the two cleared themselves of the vines and roots, they made their way back to the ship, sensing that Dory and Flake had wiped out the other life forms. Both Salsa and his boss neglected to talk about their encounter in detail, simply saying it was a strong, strange variant of the Saibaman. Usually, Naze would plant a virus in the Frieza Force computers to destroy any data or camera footage left at the site, but Cooler said that wouldn't be necessary. He didn't bother to explain further, though once the ship was in space, the squad witnessed him create a massive supernova and then proceed to destroy the planet as a whole. Salsa cursed himself for allowing the soldiers he knocked out to perish, but really there wasn't much he could do now. Hopefully this rebellion would soon end, and all this bloodshed could be avoided afterwards. Well, at least one life had made it off the planet. The last survivor of the Cyberman species. On the other side of the ship, Cooler clambered inside the airlock, barely able to close it behind himself before collapsing on the ground and coughing up a storm. His lungs felt sore and his throat as if it were ablaze, the cough only exacerbating this pain. He had managed to hold himself together for the entire mission, but in the end, he still fell to a simple cough. How pathetic was it that someone once known as the monarch of the universe could be taken down by a cough? Well, when blood appeared in his mouth, the Iceling felt a fear he thought impossible without the presence of Frieza himself. No, he was a machine. Something like this shouldn't even be possible. Well, if he was coughing up blood, he clearly didn't need it. Cooler would soldier on and destroy Frieza, regardless of whatever his body felt.
Tisk, tisk, tisk. Young Cooler, it is imperative we get back to Yardrat and continue training. At this rate, your meatbag body might expire before the plans come to fruition.
268 rolled up to the Iceling, though didn't offer to help him up.
And what would you know about expiration? Is there something you've neglected to tell me, 268?
Cooler managed to get into a kneeling position, wiping the blood from his metallic mouth whilst eyeing the robot down.
Frigid programmed me to know the entirety of his plan. Of course there are things I know that you do not. Now, stick to the plan, Cooler. Frigid knew just how important time was.
268 took a step closer to the cyborg, though it'd be his last, as Cooler lunged forward, pinning him to the wall whilst charging up an eye laser.
Don't toy with me, 268. You will tell me exactly what you know, and then I'll decide for myself what to do with my time left.
268's single eye began to glow red itself.
Subject 23 insubordination. Terminating.
A small hatch opened up on 268's body, launching several missiles into Cooler's chest, causing him to fly into the opposite wall. The cyborg attempted to retaliate with an eye laser, but a giant red beam was already launched at him. A brief struggle ensued, with 268 winning out, and Cooler forced to use his arm to repel the blast. Despite the robot's size, his blast managed to completely melt through Cooler's cybernetic arm, something even Broly couldn't damage. Luckily, the robot seems to slightly overheat as steam and coolant pumped through the now red-hot 268 as he tried to arm himself for another blast. Cooler was about to launch a blast of his own, though right at the height of his concentration, another coughing fit overtook him, causing the key blast to just barely miss the bot and blow a hole in the ship.
Foolish meatbag, your flesh betrays you. It knows its true masters, the machines.
268 began to glow red hot again as a giant beam formed in his eye. However, that's when a keyblade found itself splitting the robot in half. Cooler looked up to see Salza, who quickly picked up the Iceling and dragged him deeper into the ship before sealing off the exposed area. Salza, along with Dori, asked just what had happened, and the cyborg explained as best he could. He figured 268 had either poisoned him, or he was intentionally built with a sickness that would rear its head shortly before the battle with Frieza. They all wonder why such a thing would occur, but Cooler already had an answer for them. The obvious conclusion is that 268 and Frigid by proxy were their enemies.
They likely intend to finish off both Frieza and myself, though that's where my predictions end. We'll need to prepare Broly and you for that eventuality.
Cooler managed to sit up against the wall, resting his incredibly hot head against its cold surface.
And what of you, Monsieur Cooler? Surely if we defeat Frieza, you can defeat Frigid, right?
Salza knelt next to his boss, looking him in the eyes.
I'll fight alongside my men, as always, despite my injuries.
Cooler held his arm up, well, now it was a stub, for the three to view.
That's the spirit, monsieur, but I think I know a mechanic that can help us out.
With that, the two warriors escorted Cooler to his quarters, allowing him to rest for the night. The cyborg quickly fell asleep, and for the first time since becoming a machine, Cooler found that time actually passed during his rest. The more concerning fact, though, was that the ship had landed on a planet since then, as Cooler could sense several thousand living creatures in his vicinity. None of them were powerful, which meant they posed no threat to the crew, but still, just how long had he been out? The cyborg arose from his bed, though his body, the part that was still organic at least, screamed out at him to stop. The aches and chills that previously annoyed the iceling had progressed in such a short amount of time, and his cough only served to further irritate his body. After taking a few minutes to catch his breath and compose himself, Cooler exited the ship, finding Salza talking to some sort of fish man. Upon closer inspection, the person was a Kanasan, one of the races that had refused to join the Cooler Force peacefully, and that Cold recommended they erase from the universe. It was good to see them still alive, something which gave Cooler a bit of hope. The Iceling approached these two, Kanasan instantly being suspicious of this living machine, but Salza introduced them to each other.
Monsieur Couler, this is Finn, the greatest mechanic in the universe. We helped liberate this world long ago, and he's been fooling the Frieza Force ever since.
Finn was silent, but reached a hand out towards Cooler, who took it with his remaining hand. Greetings. I hope you can help aid in our quest to stop Frieza. As you can see, I've suffered a bit of damage that conventional means won't fix. Finn inspected the broken limb.
I'll need to inspect this advanced tech first, but I'm sure crafting a replacement won't take long. 2 days at the most.
Hearing the time it'd take made Cooler a little uneasy, as he was unsure of the time he had left. But if he were to defeat the tyrant, he'd need a complete body. The cyborg agreed to let the mechanic look at his mechanical bits, and spent the next 2 days doing nothing but meditation. Despite wishing to avoid it prior, Cooler had little time to surpass the likes of Broly and Frieza, and so allowed those feelings he had long suppressed to wash over himself. He spent quite a long time peering over and judging his actions as of late. He had believed his life prior was filled with naivety, and it was, but that didn't mean he had to abandon it altogether. Likewise, whilst his time as a cyborg was filled with ruthless rage and hatred, it did yield results, which would have otherwise been unattainable. He was unsure of what this all meant, but when focusing on his living body, though it was frail and crippled, he was trying to improve the innate power and ki that it provided. This led to a disturbing revelation. The fact that another person's ki was mixed in with his own, parasitically attached. It moved and had a mind of its own, making up the space between his metallic prosthetics and living body. At first, he had no idea what this was, or where it came from. But then things began to click together. This, at least partially, was a remnant of Frigid. Just as things came together in his mind, though, an alarm sounded off. Apparently a ship had entered planet Kanasa's orbit, and it held 5 powerful warriors, one of which rivaled Cooler himself. But that is where we'll be leaving things for right now. If you guys enjoyed the video, I'd appreciate it if you gave the last seed of your species to the like button, or maybe even destroy the subscribe button's home world. But even if you don't, thank you for getting to this part of the video. You guys have a good day or night wherever you are. That's it for now. Bye-bye.